What's up, humble farmers? Taiki here. So today I want to tell you about my worst crypto trade ever. And in this trade, not only did I lose a third of my portfolio, it left me with a lot of psychological damage that took a long time for me to overcome. So hopefully me sharing this story will allow you to avoid some of the common pitfalls that investors face in crypto. So do you know the saying, would you rather be right or would you rather make money? And I think looking back at all my past trades, the ones where I lost the most money is when my desire to be right outweighed my desire to make money. And of course, in an ideal scenario, we are right and then we make money. But sometimes, we fall into these, mental traps where, we just want to be right, And let me give you my example. So in 2023, I bought this token for a project called sudorekt. And I mean, you don't really need to know. I mean, there's a reason why this video is about like my worst trade ever, right? But it was basically this highly intellectualized DeFi infrastructure for NFTs. So I used the product early on. I was an early user. I kind of fell in love with an idea, right? This light bulb moment kind of hit my head. It's like, well, this is such a good technology. Like, it has to work, right? Like, it just has to work. And of course, like, nothing has to work, right? And even if something works, there's no guarantee that the financial token attached to this thing will actually go up. And I was also like buying this thing during the NFT bear market, and there was like no promise that NFTs will ever come back. I mean, it still really hasn't come back, right? So all in all, it was like really, really bad. But in the moment, I was like, okay, I'm buying this during the NFT bear market, this new primitive that could bring more liquidity to NFTs, and I bought the token. There was some hype around it, right? The token started doing well, which kind of built up my confidence, which is also dangerous, right? And I started buying. The token went up, I bought more, and at some point I was pretty heavily invested in this single token. So I was kind of feeling good about myself, right? It's like, oh, I'm so good, right? I bought this, smart token, right? And it's going up. But of course, at some point, the token stopped going up, and that's always an issue, right? Like, does it need Viagra? Does it have erectile dysfunction? No, it's probably just the token's trash, right? But I was kind of in this delusional state of mind where I'm like, well, like, if I liked it at 100 mil, I should love it at 70 mil, right? Like the market cap or whatever it was. So I just kept buying the dip. And I think that's one of the most common mistakes people make, right? Because they always tell us to buy low, sell high. Which makes sense, right? But like, what the fuck does that mean, right? Because yes, that might apply to Bitcoin or the S&P 500, where there's a positive drift over time. But when it comes to altcoins, that's not really the case, because 99% of altcoins go to zero, right? Because most of them are complete vaporware, complete trash, complete garbage. They deserve to go to zero. So if you're buying an altcoin, you actually want to buy altcoins that's going up, right? Because if an altcoin is going down, it's probably going down for a reason, And the way to think about it is, like, altcoins are not like the supermarket, right? Because if you go to a supermarket and you see like double ply toilet paper, good for your butthole, right? It's down 50, or it's like 50% off, it's on sale, then yeah, like, that's a good deal. Like, it makes sense for me to stock up on that toilet paper. But when it comes to shit coins, like, no pun intended, if it's going down, it's bad, right? It's bad. And that's kind of the case of like this particular token, where the metrics were not improving and the token was going down. Like, that is actually very rational, right? But for me, I was not rational in a sense. Like, I take pride in trying to be rational, but I was irrational, which still hurts me to this day. But yeah, like, I just kept buying the dip. Token kept going lower, and at some point I just had so much of this token, and I was like, fuck, like, I'm kind of trapped in this position. Like, when you fucked up, but you don't know what to do next, like, you're kind of stuck. That's kind of the state I was in, right? Where I just kept buying this token. It just kept going down. I'm like, wait, like, what's happening here, right? And of course, I had this, I kept asking myself questions like, am I wrong here, right? But the human brain is really good at rationalizing our mistakes, right? Or like rationalizing any types of behavior. And there's actually a section from this book called Best Loser Wins, which I think is like one of the most helpful videos that I've read when it comes to trading and investing. And I did a book summary on it. If you want to read it, I'll put the link in the description below. But the author had this chart of how the majority of the mistakes we make as investors is because we want to avoid pain. right? Because let's say you buy something at $10 because you think it's going to go to 30 or like whatever, right? You think it's a good decision to buy at 10 because you put in the work, you did some analysis, you did some TA, you have like multiple reasons for like why this thing should be a good buy at 10. But you could be wrong, right? But let's say you buy it at 10, it goes down. It goes to $8. It's like down 20%. Well, like now what do you do, right? Because, I mean, if you're right, then you should be willing to average down, right? Because it's better value, right? There's more upside there. But we don't really think about, well, like what if we're not right, you know? But I think a lot of people, right? We have this, and this applies to everyone, like including myself. We have this tendency to keep holding on to our losers because we don't want to sell at a loss. But subconsciously, right? Like what does it matter if you sell at a loss, right? Just like move the fuck on, like buy something better. But you know, we don't want to admit that we made a mistake. Therefore, we keep holding on to that position. And worse, we compound on that mistake by averaging down, right? Because, well, like I'm not gonna sell at a loss. In fact, I'm gonna buy more. And you know, that's one of the main ways I see people lose in markets is like they just buy something and they just keep averaging down and then they just like get absolutely hosed. That's primarily like the main cause for blowups in crypto, at least from my experience, right? I've seen friends blow up, I've seen other people blow up. It's typically because they just keep buying on the way down. Sometimes it's like buying to sell, right? And just like think rationally, because if you hold on to a position, you're kind of biased, right? But you can just sell and then buy back in, right? And that act of selling can actually allow you to help think more clearly. And I think selling is like very, very important, especially when it comes to like not only on the way up, but on the way down. Because I think people often say things like, oh, you can't go broke taking profits, right? Like sell on the way up, which in a vacuum is true. But actually in markets, taking profits too early is actually how you go broke, right? Because everyone, right? It doesn't matter if you're a good trader, bad trader, we have our wins and we have our losses. And the only way to make a lot of money is if our wins far exceed our losses. So if you take profits too early for every single one of your trades, then you don't really make that much money when you're right? So whenever you do inevitably face a loss, then that's gonna outweigh your wins. Or, you know, maybe you do make some money, but you like underperform Bitcoin or like the market just because you don't make that much money, right? So actually, right, like you actually want to like hold on to your winners a lot longer than you think and cut your losers a lot earlier than you think. And of course, it's a lot easier said than done, right? Because you know we all think that you know it's we should keep holding, right? It's just a temporary dip, and it's easier said than done. But you know, like that's something that I internalized, which I didn't really think about back then. So yeah, I wanted to avoid pain, right? Because, you know, I talked publicly about this token. I said I was bullish. So if I sell, then does that make me look stupid? But and also if I sell, then, you know, like I lose money and then I feel bad about myself. And like all these like mumbo jumbo, like all this bullshit that doesn't really matter, right? I kind of let that affect my head. And I just kept holding on to this position that kept going lower. So yeah, that felt really, really bad at the time. So for weeks, I would just hold on. I would, you know, just, yeah, it was bad, right? There's like no way to justify the reasons, right? But I think in the moment, I kept finding reasons to justify it for whatever reason. And hopefully, I'd like to think that I know better. But I think, you know, this type of mistake is something that everyone has to make at least once in order for us to grow as investors. And at some point, right, it was just down so bad. You know, I was down $230,000-ish, which was roughly a third of my portfolio back then. And I was kind of like in this state of shock. You know, I was kind of paralyzed, right? And that's also another mistake, you know, this idea of compounding mistakes is because I was in a state of shock and because I felt sorry about myself and I just felt like a fool. I kind of had this doom loop of, I guess, it's like hating myself that I couldn't really think straight, you know? You know, it's like how I was like, how can I do this? Like, why would I, like, how did I get into this position? How can I be so dumb? Like, I'm so stupid, right? It's like, I felt like this imposter syndrome. I felt like a fraud, right? It's like people pay for my research and I'm like spewing this bullshit. People watch my videos, they spend time on my videos and I'm spewing all this fucking crap about stuff that didn't even matter, and now, I'm down all this money, and then, I was kind of like hating myself for a few weeks. But then again, right, another concept I didn't really think about back then, because I was like in this bad state of mind, is there's like this opportunity cost of capital and also time, right? Because every dollar that was in this token was a dollar not in Bitcoin or another token, right? Like I could have just sold at a loss then and then just bought Bitcoin, and then maybe Bitcoin would have gone up, right? Which it tends to do. But no, like I was kind of just like kind of stuck, right? I was spending time and like on my mental headspace, like hating myself rather than taking an action. And also, right, the opportunity cost of time, right? It's like all this time of like just like feeling sorry about myself. Like I could have spent like doing fundamental analysis for another damn token, right? It's like maybe if I just manned up back then, I would have been like, you know what, like let me look at other things. Like maybe the risk reward of this token is better than the risk reward of whatever I'm in right now. And then I would have just taken the emotions out of it and be like, you know what, like fuck it, like I fucked up, it is what it is, I'm moving on. But no, like I just kept like hating myself and like just wasted weeks, right? And not only did I waste time, I wasted a bunch of money, right? Which just made everything worse, right? Avoiding pain leads to more pain over time, right? Not facing your like reality, like not facing your mistakes leads to more mistakes. And that's primarily like why I think this is like the worst trade I've ever done, right? Because there's been trades where I lost more money in terms of like a dollar amount. But this one, like I just made so many mistakes looking back that I think I like to think I would never make again. So in a way, I'm grateful that I made this mistake. But it's one of those things where like in the moment, like you just feel so bad about yourself, and it feels like you can never recover. But of course, like, we all can recover, right? And that's the beauty of markets. Like, the market doesn't care what you did yesterday. The market cares about like what are you going to do in the future, right? You have to keep pushing yourself. And that's what makes markets hard and also beautiful, right? Because it's a very individual sport, I think, where like you're responsible for your own decisions. And if you don't improve, then you're going to die, right? Like you're actually going to die, I think. So it was up to me to get out of that doom loop and just move the fuck on. So yeah, lost a bunch of money, lost like 230K, third of my portfolio. And at some point I did sell, right? Because I wasn't gonna just like die on this hill forever, right? So yeah, like I learned a lot of things. The psychological mistakes is often the most expensive ones, right? It's not really, we all get things wrong, right? Like fundamental analysis, we have a bad read on markets, and that's fine, right? We all make mistakes and we lose money, that's fine. But, ones where you lose the most money is not when your analysis is wrong, right? It's like when you just get into this bad state of mind that allows you to compound mistakes, and then, you have to be able to pivot and bounce back. And I mentioned like the markets or like trading or investing as like a sport. I think that's a good way to view it, right? Because if you're like an athlete, like play basketball or whatever, right? Like you work out, and you want to train your muscles, but you're not going to work out 8 hours a day every single day. Like you have to take breaks, otherwise you're going to get injured. But in markets, you want to think of, or I like to think of my brain as like my muscle, and if I'm always like locked in and thinking about like what, like if I'm always like super locked in, like 10 hours a day, then at some point I'm gonna burn out, right? Like my brain's gonna turn into a pile of mush, and once it becomes a pile of mush, that's when I start losing money because I just keep making mistakes. So breaks are very important, right? There's like, I'm not going to compare myself to Stanley Druckenmiller, right? One of the greatest traders of our generation. But he also had this moment in 1999 and like the early 2000s where he just made a bunch of mistakes near the top of the tech bubble. And he kind of hated himself and he said, I can't take it anymore. He said he was an emotional mess. And he took like a few month hiatus from the markets and just went to Africa, just devoid of financial news, didn't even look at the markets. And he was like, you know what, like, I don't even know if I can trade anymore. But then like a few months later, he came back to the States and he was like, you know what, like, I think I have a better grasp of everything, right? Like, I think I see everything objectively. And that's when he started crushing, right? So he was like down on the year, but then he actually had one of the best years because he had this 4 month break. And I think some people think that, oh, like to make money, you have to be like 24/7 locked in, right? But sometimes like you can make more money if you just take like a 3-month break and then come back with like a better state of mind, right? You know, there's like no like formula for succeeding in markets. Right? You just have to figure it out yourself. Like you have to fuck around and find out. You have to figure out what's right for you. And there's this quote from Ed Sikoda that stuck with me from the book Market Wizards, where he said that a losing trader is not going to transform himself, because that's the thing that winning traders do, right? If there's like a losing trader, then it's probable that he's gonna forever be like a losing trader, because if he was gonna be a winning trader, he would have done it already, right? So if you actually want to succeed, like you have to just do it yourself, right? You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? That's the definition of insanity. You have to just be real with yourself. Like, am I cut out for this? Am I good at this? And the reality is, like, I don't even know if I'm cut out for this, right? There's a chance that I just got here by being lucky, you know? I think I've done a good job. I think I'm cut out for this, but, you know, like, did I just get lucky? Like, I don't know, right? And I think that's the type of mentality you need, right? It's like have this high confidence about yourself that you can achieve anything, but also have this humility of, well, like, I could always be wrong, right? Like, strong opinions loosely held. And that's like, after this pseudo swap trade where I just like lost so much money and there was so much psychological damage that I done, but I think I needed it, you know, honestly, because yeah, like losing a third, I mean, yeah, losing a third of my portfolio, like, it sucks, right? But I mean, it wasn't 50% or 75%, right? I try to see the glass half full. I try to be an optimist in most instances. And yes, I also took like a reputational hit because I was like publicly bullish this token, and then I was like, this is so wrong. And then it's like this guy's an idiot, right? Like, why do I follow this guy, right? And you know, that also gave me imposter syndrome. But I guess fortunately, right? It's like I made this mistake in 2023, which is like pretty early on in the crypto bull market, and also because it was like early in the bull market, there really wasn't like that many people that like saw this. I'm sure some of you don't even know like what pseudo swap is or don't even remember this trade. But you know, it's public, right? And the reason I like to keep everything I do public is because, you know, I can look back and be like, wow, like, it's hard to have an ego when like 2 years ago I was like, I fucked up like 10 times in like this one trade. Like, how can I have an ego, right? It's like, yeah, like, I don't know anything, right? So yeah, I'm glad that, you know, I made this mistake, because now that my portfolio has grown a lot larger, it's like, hopefully I don't make those mistakes, right? I mean, knock on wood. I mean, I don't, you know, I probably will, honestly, but hopefully I'm able to like recognize those mistakes earlier on. But anyways, that's gonna be it for me, right? Yeah, like, I was like, looking back, you know, I was like buying this complex infrastructure token, and I thought it would go up, but I think in reality, I just wanted to buy this complex project token, because if it went up, then I would look smart, right? I just like wanted to look smart, I think, which is horrible, right? Anyways, like, you know, like, what my question to you is like, what's your worst trade that you've ever made in crypto or markets? Because I think worst trades, it's subjective, right? It's not about how much money you lost. You know, it's more about like psychological damage, right, that you took. But I think we all have to recover, right, from all these mistakes, because losing money is the best tuition. You know, it's better to lose a bunch of money earlier on than later in life, right? When you're much older and you can't afford to take those hits. But anyways, thank you, humble farmers. See you guys later, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And, you know, hopefully you take a few lessons out of it, because I fucked up many times. I don't want you to make those same mistakes. So anyways, have a good one. Bye-bye.